Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown. Now, I am not a sex expert, but I did grow up watching Dr. Root and Loveline with Dr. Drew, and I've spent some time on this earth and have experienced some things and have witnessed some things, and because I am an excellent listener, I have heard some things. I'm a student of human behavior, and I love to learn. I love to research topics and present what I have learned, which is what I do on this podcast. And of course, I'm going to get my 2 cents about the matter, but I will also include what experts have to say as well. So, let's talk about sex. Since a young age, I have been curious about sex. In the porn addiction episode, I spoke about seeing porn for the first time at a neighbor's house when I was like 7 years old. By the time I hit puberty, I was really curious about my body and the changes it was going through. I remember being at the hospital and there being a health library, and I always wanted to go into it. So one day I asked my mom with hopes that she would not follow me in, and yes, she didn't follow me in. I grabbed a few pamphlets about sex and the changes my body was going through, and I hid them in my little purse backpack. And I remember going home, and once I thought, like, no one's going to come into my room, pulling them out and reading them, and then shoving them in my nightstand and, like, you know, buried under a bunch of books, just in case, like, nobody goes to my nightstand and find these pamphlets. As if it was like porn or something. So that's when, unbeknownst to me, I started doing what Betty Dodson, who I've spoke about before, in the I forgot the name of the episode, but we were doing the Betty Dodson rock and roll method. There we go. That episode. So I was doing what she'd been encouraging women to do for decades. I would grab a handheld mirror and look at myself and compare it to the pamphlet sketches of a teen girl in the pamphlets. So the sketches have, like, you know, a little black and white sketch of a woman, a teen girl's body, and with, you know, a little breasts forming and pubic hair forming and like how a vagina is supposed to look. And I would compare it and do all that good stuff. So I was never given the sex talk by my parents. That's why I was so excited when I got to take the permission slip home in 5th grade or 6th grade for sex ed. I wasn't necessarily excited to hand them the permission slip because that was, like, awkward and nerve breaking, you know, but I think I probably, like, you know, slid in a pile of some other papers and was like, here, sign this, and, like, walked away and then came back once it was signed. And I remember there's, like, no conversation had. It was just on the table was a signed permission slip, and just, like, being like, yes, I get to take sex ed. Now, this wasn't a thorough sex educational session. It was probably like 2 hours long, and they had all 4 of the 5th or 6th grade classes pile into the cafeteria / gymnasium and sit on the floor and watch a movie with cartoon sperm. Then they separated the girls from the boys, and we went into a classroom with the same sex teachers for a deeper conversation. Now, I honestly don't remember any of their teachings. I just remember one teacher in particular, hella giddy, like she was at happy hour with her girls, and me and my best friend Dana at the time were laughing at her, being like, yeah, she a hoe. But there wasn't anything informative taught. I mean, nothing that I didn't already know. You know, I'd seen porn. I was reading pamphlets, you know, kids talk. So they really didn't teach me anything new. And me having sex in elementary school and even junior high was never a thought for me. It wasn't something that I was trying to do or even like imagined myself doing. And most of my friends didn't start doing it until high school. I had one who started in 6th or 7th grade, and she actually did get pregnant like our junior year of high school. And there was a chick my freshman year who showed up pregnant. And I remember she was short. She was shorter than me. I'm like barely 5'3". So she was probably like 5 foot and super big belly, looked like a little Oompa Loompa. And when she got closer to her pregnancy, she disappeared and I never saw the girl again. I think she was a year ahead of me. She was probably a sophomore. And I only know of one other girl who got pregnant our senior year. So I made the conscious decision to wait until marriage, which I still ain't married. So yeah, that would have been a long ass wait. But again, I made the conscious decision to have sex at 19 years old after a semester away at college. And I made the same conscious decision to get on birth control. So I give props to myself for being a mature teenager. But one thing I wish I would have been taught was about sexually transmitted infections and diseases and how you can catch them. Because it's not just through, you know, vaginal sex. And I had to learn that the hard way. I mean, I was catching things when I was a virgin. So, yeah, sex ed didn't really teach anything. And sex ed and telling kids simply not to have sex was not helpful at all. It was just a fun way to avoid a math lesson for the day. And once the reality show Teen Mom became wildly popular, which I was probably like in college when that happened, it was evident that teen pregnancy was not only on the rise, but it was becoming attractive. Like these kids literally wanted to have kids. And some of them, you know, they came from broken homes and they weren't loved the right way and they wanted to love their kid the right way. So it was understandable, like where they were coming from, but it definitely did make becoming pregnant attractive. So whatever these teens were being taught or not taught at school and at home wasn't proving to be effective. And abstinence and abstinence-only education is the topic of today's episode. So a review article on ScienceDirect.com reads, abstinence from sexual intercourse is an important behavioral strategy for preventing basically HIV and other sexually transmitted infections, and pregnancy among adolescents. Now, many adolescents, including most younger adolescents, have not initiated sexual intercourse, and many sexually experienced adolescents and young adults are abstinent for varying periods of time. There is a broad support for abstinence as a necessary and appropriate part of sexuality education. Controversy arises when abstinence is provided to adolescents as a sole choice and where health information on other choices is restricted or misrepresented. Although abstinence is theoretically fully effective, in actual practice, abstinence often fails to protect against pregnancy and STIs. Few Americans remain abstinent until marriage. Many do not or cannot marry, and most initiate sexual intercourse and other behavioral behaviors as adolescents. Although abstinence is a healthy behavioral option for teens, abstinence as a sole option for adolescents is scientifically and ethically problematic. A recent emphasis on abstinence-only programs and policies appears to be undermining more comprehensive sexuality education and other government-sponsored programs. We believe that abstinence-only education programs, as defined by federal funding requirements, are morally problematic by withholding information and promoting questionable and inaccurate opinions. Abstinence-only programs threaten fundamental human rights to health, information, and life. Now, personally, I don't think withholding information ever in any situation is helpful, which is why I love to research topics. And it is especially harmful when it comes to sex. The only way to empower our youth is to provide them with adequate information. Despite them legally not being adults, it is their body and the choice is theirs as to what they want to do with their body. Now, I'm sure that is hard for some parents to hear, but it's true. And you were a kid once, so you know. Ain't nobody telling you what to do that didn't make you want to do what they wanted to do. You were going to do what you're going to do. So anyways, but you are not with your kid every minute of every day. And in those unsupervised minutes, they decide what they want to do with their body, whether it's masturbate or have sex. But if they are equipped with the right information, then they may decide, like I did, to wait. Obviously not till marriage, but I waited till I was a full-grown adult and can make a conscious decision. I wasn't in high school. I wasn't a teen mom. I still ain't a mom by choice. But, or they may decide to have protected sex. Now, I have a friend who was having protected sex with her high school boyfriend and sometimes with her parents in the next room. And she never got pregnant or had an STI. And now she is married to her high school sweetheart and they have 2 beautiful kids and they've been married for over a decade. So empower kids and teenagers, not kids, but teenagers, to make the right decisions. You never know. There are some really smart kids out there. And if you raise them right, you got to trust that you gave them adequate information and that you raised them right. So why not equip them with information and trust them to make the right decision for themselves? Now, in the Journal of Adolescent Health, Diane Kittredge, MD, wrote, the Ambulatory Pediatric Association, APA, strongly supports the concerns expressed by the Society for Adolescent Medicine, SAM, in its recent position paper on abstinence-only education. The SAM statement and its accompanying evidence review in the Journal of Adolescent Health are important in that they clearly demonstrate how little evidence currently exists to support the significant shift that has occurred over the last 8 years in public policy and funding for programs to prevent adolescent pregnancy. We in APA are concerned about this shift. Although the APA agrees that abstinence is a healthy choice for adolescents, we feel strongly that abstinence education should be provided within health education programs that provide adolescents with complete and accurate information about sexual health. We support federal funding for programs that teach more than abstinence only. We are concerned that firmly held beliefs rather than scientific information are guiding the conduct of biomedical, clinical, and public health research and programs. We support rigorous evaluation of wide range of programs rather than narrow adherence to untested methodology as exemplified by the current abstinence-only programs. It is only through such evaluations of current programs and thorough testing of promising new approaches that we will be able to improve the quality and outcome of healthcare services for children and adolescents. So yeah, there isn't anything wrong with teaching abstinence. I did it as an adolescent, but teach complete and accurate information about sexual health as well. So we will take a break and discuss more abstinence-only education concerns.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Welcome back to the GSMC Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown. Now, the reason why I decided to do this abstinence-only podcast is when I was doing the Betty Dotson rock and roll method technique, there was an article on her website, and in it had mentioned one of the young girls who had been kidnapped as a young girl and captured for years and being impregnated by her capturer. And I can't remember which girl it was, if it was Elizabeth Smart or Casey Lee Dugard. I can't remember. But that the girl who was captured, she now travels the world talking about her experience and how she was taught this abstinence-only teaching. And in it, she was told that, someone who has sex, a woman who has sex, is not going to be wanted by another man. They're almost like chewed up pieces of gum. And because of that, she didn't run. She had opportunities to run, but she didn't run. And that really just affected me because it's terrible that something that was taught to her in school at such a young, fragile age when her mind is very impressionable, she truly believed that so much that she was afraid to run. So that's why I decided to do this research. So Gutenmaker or Gutenmacher.com, or it's Gutenmacher. I'm going to just spell it. GUTTMACHER.org, actually. Gutenmacher.org has an article entitled Abstinence Only Until Marriage Programs Are Ineffective and Harmful to Young People. Expert review confirms, written in 2017. It reads, a new review of the U.S. sexuality education policies and programs reaffirms the harms of abstinence-only until marriage, AOUM, programs and the importance of investing in comprehensive sexuality education. 13 leading experts in adolescent sexuality research and policy, including Guttmacher Institute researcher Laura Lindberg, review the scientific evidence accumulated over several decades and once again conclude that AOUM programs are ineffective, stigmatizing, and unethical. So that was stigmatizing so much to this young girl who was captured that she was afraid to run because she thought of herself as a chewed up piece of gum because of what she was told. Now, the review published in the Journal of Adolescent Health examines the U.S. government's decades-long history of funding AOUM programs. It also presents evidence on AOUM programs' efficiency and potential harms, as well as the efficiency and benefits of more comprehensive sexuality education programs. Based on this body of research, the Society of Adolescent Health and Medicine has published updated recommendations on sexuality education policies and programs, reaffirming the importance of approaches that are comprehensive and grounded in scientific evidence. In theory, abstinence is 100% effective at preventing pregnancy and STIs. However, many adolescents who intend to practice abstinence fail to actually do so, and they often fail to use condoms or other forms of contraceptive when they do have intercourse. Considerable scientific evidence accumulated over the past 20 years has found that AOUM programs are not effective at preventing pregnancy or STIs, nor do they have a positive impact on age at first sexual intercourse, number of sexual partners, or other behaviors. Despite this evidence, the U.S. government has spent approximately $2 billion on domestic AOUM programs over the past 2 decades. Based on the available evidence, experts assert that government support of these programs has undermined sexuality education in the U.S. Dr. Lindberg prior research documented a decline in the U.S. adolescent reports of receiving formal sex education on a range of topics, including birth control, in the last decade. AOUN programs are not only ineffective, but also potentially harmful to adolescents. These programs often promote gender stereotypes that are associated with negative sexual health behaviors. They fail to provide pertinent sexual health information to sexually active adolescents and those who are already pregnant or parenting. And they stigmatize sexually active young people by implying that those who have sex are less worthy than their abstinent peers. Again, that brings up the kid who was kidnapped. AOUN programs also marginalize and systematically ignore the needs of sexual minority youth, including LGBTQ adolescents. More comprehensive sexuality education programs, on the other hand, are not only effective at preventing pregnancy and STIs among adolescents, but also helpful in guiding young people as they learn how to navigate relationships, negotiate with partners, and become sexually healthy adults. I'm going to say that again. They're also helpful in guiding young people as they learn how to navigate relationships, negotiate with partners, and become sexually healthy adults. We definitely need more sexually healthy adults. Adolescent health experts emphasize that access to complete and accurate sexual health information has repeatedly been recognized as a basic human right. Governments, healthcare providers, and educators have an ethical obligation to provide such information to their citizens, patients, and students. So I personally would like to highlight some important bullet points on the harm this type of education is causing. They fail to provide pertinent sexual health information to sexually active adolescents and those who are already pregnant or parenting. By the time these classes come around, some are already sexually active, so teaching abstinence does nothing for them. And what about those who have been molested or raped? What is it teaching them and telling them about themselves? According to this article, it is stigmatizing sexually active young people by implying that those who have sex are less worthy than their abstinent peers. AOUN programs also marginalize and systematically ignore the needs of sexually minority youth, including LGBTQ adolescents. So the LGBTQ community is completely ignored. That is a whole curriculum that needs to be created. And maybe it could be optional for those who actually identify, or it could be for everyone so that everyone has the basic understanding and can grow up to be sexually healthy adults who know about all sexes and sexual preferences. And if the LGBTQ community, if their needs are not being addressed, what is it doing to their psyche? Especially as a young, impressionable kid who is probably struggling with their identity. I know kids these days are a little bit more about it as far as who they are. They represent it. It was more of, back in my day, like, if you were gay, you didn't come out the closet until you graduated from high school. But it wasn't till soon after I graduated where kids were like, they had LGBTQ groups at school, and they were proud in high school. By the time they got to be in college, they were who they were. And so those kids, especially back like in my day where it was more hidden, what was that doing to their psyche? And the kids who even now are like, bout it, this is who I am. What is it doing to their psyche if they're completely being ignored? So the basis of these teachings are based on moral and religious beliefs. And as a person who shares a lot of those moral beliefs, I'm also realistic and practical and understand that not everyone has the same beliefs as me. And adolescents haven't had the time to figure out what they believe. They know what was taught to them or what was told to them. Figuring out your sexuality helps to form what you believe. So empower our youth with all the facts and knowledge so that they can make an informed decision. And yes, okay, they're kids. Maybe they won't be making informed decisions, and maybe it's trial and error. Sometimes you got to make mistakes to figure out how to do right. And sometimes I don't like to call anything that I've done a mistake or regret anything, because they're all life lessons. So they're all life lessons that led me to who I am and formed my thinking. And it's all because I had to personally experience things. And some people are like me. You got to experience things. They might tell you, don't touch the stove is hot. You can clearly see that it's hot. And some people can go off of what is being told to them and what they see with their own eyes and not touch the stove. But some folks is curious and they want to touch the stove. They get burned, and guess what? They don't touch it again. Or some have to keep touching it and touching it and touching it until they learn it. But the bottom line is everyone is different. So teaching everyone the same way, right? And just abstinence only, and not giving them the full picture and empowering them with all the information. It's not beneficial, right? Just like everyone learns differently. So when it comes to other teaching methods, that have absolutely nothing to do with sex and abstinence. It can be math or English. There's different ways that you have to teach a different student. Just like you can't raise all three of your kids the exact same way and think that they're going to turn out the exact same way. All right. That's me on my little soapbox. But, yeah, my soapbox. Let's get into some more researched articles from experts. So thoughtco.com has statistics about teen birth rates by states based off of sex ed. So it was last updated in July 2019, and it reads, when the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention announced in April 2012 that teen birth rates in the U.S. hit a new low in 2010, and revealed which states had the highest and lowest rates, it prompted a question. Were those outcomes affected by individual state requirements for sex education and or abstinence-only education? So there's a huge list. I'm only going to go part of it. This one is basically on no mandate. So states that have no mandate on sex education. So there are 9 states with no sex education or HIV education mandate. Those 9 include Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, Idaho, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Texas, and Virginia. 5 of the states listed above also rank among the top 12 states with the highest teenage birth rates, and 4 rank in the top 6. So Mississippi is ranked number 1, Arkansas is number 3, Texas is number 4, Louisiana number 6, and Arizona number 12. So they have no sex education mandates in their state, and yet they have, and as a result, not and yet, but as a result, they have the highest teenage birth rates. So an earlier report issued by the Guttmacher Institute in September 2006 compiled teen pregnancy statistics by state among the top 10 states with the highest rates of teen pregnancy among females aged 15 to 19. 5 are states without mandated sex education or HIV education. So Arizona, number 2, Mississippi, number 3, Texas, number 5, Florida, number 6, and Arkansas, number 10. That same report ranked that the top 10 states with the highest rates of live births among teenage girls aged 15 to 19. Again, 5 are states that do not require sex ed to be taught in schools. If and when it is taught, these states do not require information on contraception be provided, but they do require that abstinence be stressed. Okay, so either there's no sex education, and if there is sex education, it speaks nothing about contraceptive, but preaches abstinence. And these states, again, have the highest birth rates. And the ranking is Mississippi number 1, Texas number 2, Arizona number 3, Arkansas number 4, and Louisiana number 7. So to summarize, in states where sex ed is not taught, and when it is taught, it teaches abstinence only and has no mention of contraceptive, these states have the highest rates of live birth in teens in the country. So what does this tell us? 1, sex ed is important, and 2, teaching about contraceptives is necessary. Now, Guttmaker.org says the decline in teen pregnancy in recent years can be linked to improvements in teens' contraceptive use. Comparing reports from 2 periods of NSFG data, mid-2006 to mid-2008 and mid-2008 to mid-2010, Guttmaker researchers found moderate increase in teens' use of any contraceptive method, highly effective methods, and dual methods, i.e. condoms and hormonal methods simultaneously. So specifically the use of hormonal contraceptives at last sex among sexually active women of 15 to 19 increased from 37% in 2006 to 2008 to 47% in 2008 to 2010. And dual method use increased from 16% to 23% over the period. And the use of long-active reversible contraceptive methods, i.e. the IUD and implant, increased from 1.4% to 4.4%. The recent trends in sexual experience and contraceptive use are clear enough, but understanding what is driving these behaviors is more of a challenge. Advocates often credit education programs for the positive trends. The quality and quantity of evaluation research have improved dramatically over the last decade, and there is now clear evidence that comprehensive sex education programs can change the behaviors that put young people at risk of pregnancy. Such programs have been shown to delay sexual debut, reduce frequency of sex and number of partners, increase condom or contraceptive use, or reduce sexual risk taking. By contrast, programs that exclusively promote abstinence outside of marriage have been proven ineffective at stopping or even delaying sex. At the end of the day, the credit for the decline in teen pregnancy goes to adolescents themselves who are making an effort to prevent unintended pregnancy. The question now is whether society will do its part by adopting policies that support and equip young people with knowledge, skills, and services to stay healthy. The research shows that adolescents need more comprehensive education, not less, and increased access to contraceptive services, not less. To argue anything else misses an opportunity to sustain these trends. And on that note, let's take a break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown. Now, I found some information about a different way to teach abstinence-only. During the Bush administration, it taught abstinence in regards to waiting until marriage. This study taught delayed abstinence, so in other words, wait longer until you have sex. The study done by researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Waterloo in Canada, as well as the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, also in Canada, found that abstinence education given to 662 African American 6th and 7th graders significantly reduced sexual activity. As NPR's Brenda Wilson reported for the network's newscast, it says, the research developed a curriculum that was designed to get middle schoolers in the 6th and 7th grade to put off having sex until they were more mature and could handle the consequences. There were no lectures. It was an interactive program. The young people had discussions about resisting peer pressure through role-playing and games. Unlike previous programs, it did not define abstinence as delaying sex until marriage. They began by considering, what are their goals and dreams for the future, what they would like to do in 5 years from now, what would they like to do 10 years from now, and then they have to consider how sexual involvement might make it difficult or impossible to achieve some of those goals. I mean, that sounds like common sense, like a good common sense discussion to have with a group of teenagers. What are your goals? What happens if you have sex? How can that, affect your goals? Okay, go on with the article. It says 2 years after completing the program, a survey showed that the abstinence training was effective in getting 67% of the kids to delay having sex. That's compared to 48% of students in another group who only received basic health information. While the new Abstinence-Only program worked with younger teens, Scheer says it is important to note that when the researchers caught up with most of the teens 2 years later, many had become sexually active. It would have been better, she says, if the researchers had followed the teens to see when and if they became pregnant. But both the author and analysis say further studies should be done to see if this abstinence-only program works in other settings with young teens who have different backgrounds. Now, I certainly am curious to know if any of those teens did end up pregnant. We know they started having sex, but it doesn't mean that they ended up getting pregnant. And I believe that the main goal for this abstinence-only teaching is to prevent teenage pregnancies and STIs. So if they're not getting pregnant and they're having sex in a smarter way, that's achieving that goal. Even though, of course, teenagers shouldn't be having sex. I believe that too. And I ain't a parent. But I was once a teenager and no, we were dumb and too immature to be having sex. So I'm also curious to know how that teaching would have affected different races and socioeconomic situations. So it's great that they engaged in conversations that were interactive with the teens about their future. I'm sure it helped them to delay putting off sex so that they could reach their goals. And I would wager that even the ones that ended up having sex 2 years later ended up using contraceptive. So it should have resulted in less pregnancy in the long run compared to the teens who didn't receive sex ed or just the basic sex ed. So teen pregnancy is an American problem. Stats from 2011 show U.S. teenage pregnancy and birth rates are high compared to other developed countries. So this is international data that shows U.S., France, Germany, the Netherlands, Canada, and U.K. And it compares their birth rate versus their pregnancy rate. And rates are listed as numbers per 1,000 girls from ages 15 to 19 years old. So in the U.S., pregnancy rates were 72.2% and birth rates were 41.9% compared to France, which had 25.7% of pregnancy rate and 7.8% of birth rate. Germany, 18.8% of pregnancy rate and 10.1% birth rate. Netherlands, 11.8% pregnancy rate and 3.8% birth rate. Canada, 29.2% pregnancy rate, and birth rate, 13.3%. And the UK had 41.3% pregnancy rate and 26.7% birth rate. So, I mean, I guess America likes to be on top and winning. So we were definitely winning for sure. I mean, the birth rate of 72.2% compared to the next highest, which was Canada, 41.3%. That's still a huge difference, right? Birth rate in America, 41.9% compared to the next biggest one, which is the UK, 26.7%. Still a huge difference. So teen pregnancy being a problem is one thing that everyone, conservatives and liberals, can agree on. And both parties agree that sex ed is important, but what isn't agreed upon is the way it is being taught and the amount of hours being dedicated to teaching, which is what it is, just mere hours. I read that mostly only 3 hours for your average junior high and high schooler is what is being taught, which is totally inadequate. I remember, so I had the sex ed in elementary, which was either 5th or 6th grade for like 2 hours. I don't recall getting anything in junior high. I remember taking health my freshman year of high school, and in that whole semester long of class that we had health, only 3 hours was dedicated to sex. But before we focus on hours, hopefully we can get to a point of agreement. There is nothing wrong with promoting abstinence. The problem is how ineffective it is to teach abstinence only. And there isn't anything wrong with teaching different contraceptive methods. And there is a way to do so without promoting sex, but rather promoting safe sex or encouraging. Let's not say promoting, rather encouraging safe sex. This in turn better equips our adolescents to make an informed decision about their sex life. And teens these days have way more access to ill-informed information about sex than previous generations. I mean, they have constant access to the internet through their phones and tablets. So why not counter that with something informative? Additionally, courses on sexting and what is not only inappropriate but illegal should be covered. I mean, there are things that we're teaching that I'm not going to say outdated because that information still needs to be received, but there are other layers that need to be added to it. This whole technology component. So we need to consider what's going on with technology, and because it's a whole different world. There wasn't sexting when I was in school. There wasn't even sexting. We were barely texting when I was in college. So things that a lot of parents and teachers never even had to think about when they were in school, these kids are dealing with on a daily basis. So sending and receiving pics were not an issue in my day. Nobody was taking pics and going to get them developed and handing them over to a crush when I was a teenager. Nor was anyone writing dirty letters, but it's so easy for these teens to snap a pic and send a short, sexy message. This makes it even harder to just tell kids not to have sex. As a nation, we need to take a good hard look at what our adolescents have to deal with on a daily basis and keep it real with them and try to meet them where they are. An honest conversation, an honest interactive conversation is what worked in that test group that I just spoke about. And our youth, they ain't about the BS. So let's keep it real with the sex talk and actually converse with the teens of America. So I definitely appreciate your time, and I thank you for listening to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Until next time, I'm Gaelika Brown.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.